All right, are we live? Just making sure we are good to go before we get started.
We're live.
We're live. All right, hi everyone. Welcome to Midwest Design Week Day 4. We're so excited you're here. My name is Rosanna, co-president of AIGA Cincinnati, one of the 70 plus chapters of AIGA, the Professional Association for Design, and one of the 4 chapters who put this whole week together. Our theme for Midwest Design Week is culture. And we've been very intentional about what culture specifically means to us during this time of the world. Yesterday's news in Louisville pertaining to Breonna Taylor's death in particular is sitting heavy with a lot of us this morning. AIGA Louisville has been an integral part of Midwest Design Week, and our thoughts are with the families, the friends, the communities, the city of Louisville, the nation, and those pushing to put the right foot forward. We hope that in continuing our events this week, we, attendees and speakers alike, continue to inspire each other to be agents of positive change in this world. Now, shifting gears to our event this morning, how to measure success using human behaviors with Essa Naser of Growth Mob. So let me share my screen really quickly. All right. All right, so this event would not have been possible without the support of our event sponsor, Valve and Meter. Here's a little bit about them that they like to share. Valve and Meter is a performance marketing agency whose mission is to deliver transformational growth to their clients through new customer acquisition strategies that are repeatable, scalable, and profitable. Their decision-making is data-driven, and their core values are think, love, serve, transform, and be just. Valve and Meter Performance Marketing is headquartered in Indianapolis, Indiana, and is proud to sponsor Midwest Design Week. And a special shout out to AIGA Indy President and Valve and Meter alum, Ashley Lay. Congratulations on a terrific Design Week. To learn more, follow Valve and Meter on Instagram at Valve and Meter. Thank you, Valve and Meter. Midwest Design Week is grateful for your support, as well as the support of all of our sponsors this year. All right, some housekeeping things. Let me stop sharing. Please let us know if you have any questions throughout the event. We have our team of support on the event stream right now. And so if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the YouTube chat or on Slack. You can use the Thursday channel. If it's a technical support that you need, we have a support channel as well. Our Midwest Design Week team will collect any questions that we have, including questions for Q&A, which we will have at the end of the event. And then if you need us for any reason at all, please ping us on Slack. Now, to introduce our speaker. Essa is the founder of Growth Mob, which is an agency specializing in growth hacking strategies through the implementation of branding, interaction design, technology, marketing, product development, and innovation, using all of the experiences gained over the last 20 plus years within each space. He is also recently interim COO of an early stage health tech startup and working on 2 other startups, mortgagebyte.com and IP Ventures. Please join me in welcoming Essa Naser.
Thank you, Rosanna. It's great to see you and great to be here. Let me go ahead and start my screen share. So, thank you everyone for being here. I'm really excited to be a part of Midwest Design Week. I want to thank you to AIGA for having me, and also for Valve and Meter, obviously, for sponsoring this talk. It's a fitting sponsor, to say the least. Now, Before I get started, I want to just mention what my goal is for the day, and it is to hopefully provide everyone with a new set of lenses to look through, potentially a new perspective to see the world. And if everything goes well, then hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to take these concepts and these ideas and apply them to your job, to your work, to your team, possibly even some things in life. So with that, I do just want to mention something about Design Week and the theme. And I recently saw this quote. I use a lot of quotes in my presentations, which you'll notice, I'm sure. But Walt Whitman said to be curious and not judgmental. And I believe that curious people ask a lot of questions. And that's something that I do almost to a fault, I'd say. But it's fitting, I believe, for this week and for the recent news in Louisville. So hopefully these ideas, these concepts will get you thinking, will get you asking more questions and not judging any more than we should be. And that being said, I would just like to mention that at the end of this presentation, I do have a QR code that you'll be able to scan really easily with your phone. I'd like to get any feedback, any ideas that you might have to improve this. I'm always looking to improve and make these ideas better and evolve them over time. So I'd love any feedback you guys could give me. So to get started, let's talk about how we measure success. And in order for us to do that, we need to really discuss how we measure success today in the typical world of business. And I can tell you that for the last 25 or so years, I've been asked to help a lot of people with projects, and it's typically a specific project. And the question that I ask every single time is, what's the objective? What's the business objective to this project? And the answer almost every time is ROI, or a return on our investment. And ROI is extremely important. I am not denying that. It's like oxygen for you and I to breathe. It's required for any company to exist. It's kind of like battery power in your phone. However, I don't believe that ROI should be the goal. And there are a couple of really glaring reasons for that, I'm sure, among many others. But the first one is that ROI is essentially the most lagging indicator. It's what we are able to figure out after all of the work has been done, after we've designed, created our products, marketed and sold them, and paid everyone to do all of that work. And then after all of that, we figure out how much we have left over. We can try to move a little bit further left and understand other things around how well we're doing internally. But the other really big problem with ROI is that we don't wake up in the morning excited to achieve an ROI. It's not how we're programmed. And at least the majority of us aren't. I was actually in a recent meeting where someone told me they did wake up every morning and thought about ROI. And of course, this was someone at the leadership level. And once we kind of finished the discussion, we did realize that, the people on the front lines, those people that we're managing and that we're leading, aren't really looking or doing what they do every single day for ROI. So if we try to look at other business measures and try to understand how well we're doing operationally, we can look at certain factors or certain ways of operations like lean, et cetera, and try to measure how well we're doing there. And then trying to get a little bit closer, we can look at things like NPS score, which is something that we rely on a lot these days in business. And NPS stands for Net Promoter Score. It's essentially one question, and it's in a survey form, and we send it out, and it's essentially how likely are you to recommend or mention this product or service to a friend or family member. And while NPS is heavily relied upon, I also have a problem with it again, and that is typically because it is a survey, and we inherently lie on surveys. It's just human nature. I believe we treat them as tests. We want to get a good grade. And an example of this is a research group that had sent out a study to a large number of Americans, asking how many of them actually went to church every Sunday. And in that same research study, they had a slightly reframed question that was created in order to get the truthful answer. And while everyone said that 60% of them went to church every Sunday, the true answer, or the truth, was actually 15%. So it's been proven that we don't necessarily tell the truth on surveys, and they're not the best and most reliable tool. Along with that, it's really just a sliver in time. A survey is going to give us one instance of how we feel, and it's probably just going to be based on how we feel at the moment. So how do we want to understand our business KPIs, or at least how well we're doing in the eyes of our customers? In order for us to do that, we really need to distinguish and make sure we understand the difference between our people measures and our business measures. These are very distinct differences that we have to understand in the businesses that we do today, and the products and services we bring into the world. Another way to think of it is not necessarily what we spend our money on, but why we're spending that money. So if we look at business measures and go back to ROI and business outcomes, and then consumer sentiment scores, what are those factors that we need to understand around how people feel, around how us as humans really feel about a business or a product or an organization, a nonprofit, our institutions, a hospital, a school? All of these things apply here. So I hope you can kind of swap things out as you see fit. But in order for us to really measure people and understand how well we view a product or a service in today's world, the goal is really advocacy. And that is the biggest investment we can make in a business. In order for anyone to become an advocate, though, loyalty is a prerequisite. We can't ever become an advocate of a business, a product, a brand, or an organization without being loyal first. In order for us to become loyal to any product or service or whatnot, insert whatever you'd like here, trust is fundamental. It's at the foundation of all of it. And that's why, in my opinion, we really live in more of a trust economy than the typical one that you are aware of today. And that's because trust is really the currency of all business. It's how much do I trust you to provide me with the value or product, a product with the value that I expect, if not more so. That's why we always say go the extra mile, and first impressions are so important. It's the foundation behind that. So let's look at trust over time to really understand how this takes effect. If we look at everything on this x-axis, you can see that every one of these marks is an event, and event 0 to event 3 are all our own experiences with a brand. It's our job to get people to trust us more. So as long as we can get everyone to go up this level of trust, then we are doing our jobs. Now, if that first experience is a good one, but then we don't do any extra work after that, then trust tends to degrade. It requires continual relationship building and continual work. But if we were to think of trust in the sense of a ladder instead of a sales funnel, as we typically do, then we could say that every single one of those micro experiences I just showed you on that graph could be considered a rung in this ladder. And our job as a brand, a product, an organization is to get our users, our customers, the people we're serving, to go up this ladder every single time they experience our brand, and hopefully cross these 3 thresholds. The first being trust, second loyalty, and ultimately advocacy, like I said. So in order to understand these things, let's get into the definitions of what each of them mean in the context of this framework. The first one is the trust threshold. And if the first experience anyone has with this ladder that we are showing here is a bad one, then they essentially get off the ladder. That's why first impressions are so important. It's really hard to get someone back on the ladder if that first experience that they have with your product or brand is a bad one. But the definition of trust and that threshold that we cross specific to this framework is that point in time that we make that first investment of time, information, or money or energy into a product or service. This can come in a lot of different forms. It could be that email address because it's an identifier now, and that's obviously got some value to it. It could be someone just actually seeing your logo in one place versus another. Now, we want to get people to ultimately become loyal to our brand and our product after trusting us that first few times. And loyalty in the context of this framework is very specific in the sense that it's when we self-determine that we are going to continue to use a product or service again in the future. It's not a loyalty card. It's not buy one, get one free. It's someone that says, you solved my problem so well that I don't need to shop around anymore. Along with that, I assume you're going to continue to deliver on the promise that you are making me. Now, if we continue to do our jobs well enough, then we get people to cross what is the advocacy threshold. And there's a specific definition for advocacy in this context as well. And it is that point in time that we actually invest in the future success of a product or a business. And this comes in a lot of different forms, obviously. We can consider it as referrals, telling our family and friends, giving unsolicited feedback, good or bad, is actually considered an advocacy behavior. Now, at this point in time, we actually attach our personal seal of approval to this brand or this product or this organization. What that means is that these rungs in the ladder actually get further apart. So it's harder to come back down or even get off of the ladder if you think about it. And this is why advocacy is really the truest goal for us to achieve as businesses. This is what we want to ultimately happen and the value we want to create. Because a customer that is willing to promote or even defend your brand is one of the best investments that any business can make. And we kept talking at the beginning of this presentation around return on investment being monetary, but this is not monetary. This is working to create as much value that you can for a customer that provides you with a return on your investment. So let's look at the ROI of advocacy. The first is forgiveness. Anyone that becomes an advocate of your brand is going to be the first to forgive you if you do something wrong. Alongside that, they're going to give you the best feedback possible, whether that's good or bad. I've worked with development teams that have kind of pushed recommendations or requests from their users to the bottom of the pile, and I've literally had to flip things on their head because it's gold, in my opinion. Those are investments in how we can make our product or service better. They're also going to defend your brand, sometimes until their faces turn blue. And we've all had that conversation between Android and Apple and iOS, et cetera. So it's very true these days. We also self-identify ourselves as a community. Subaru comes to mind. They're also going to be the best possible sales team for your brand because they're not being paid, it's free, and their opinion counts more than what your marketers and your salespeople are telling you. That's why advocacy is really the goal here. Sorry about that. So let's go back to how we were trying to measure success and how those measures are related. We mentioned business measures being ROI, business outcomes, consumer sentiment scores, et cetera. But if people measures are really what we need to understand around trust, loyalty, and advocacy, and that is the perspective of our customer, then we could say that these lagging indicators are actually met by these leading indicators of trust, loyalty, and advocacy, and that we can understand via the behaviors of our customers how well we're doing and essentially how effective we are versus how efficient we are. And something that I've said for many years is that we cannot be efficient without being effective first. The idea here is kind of like this idea of a leaky bucket. If we're putting a bunch of customers into our bucket and we're losing trust out of the holes in this bucket, then it probably makes sense to fix these holes first. And this happens very often in businesses today. So let's take a closer look at these specific behaviors around trust, loyalty, and advocacy. And you can say everything prior to crossing that trust threshold is really going to be that decision-making process in the sales funnel. Once we cross this threshold of trust, then that's that first behavior of investment. And if you've got a product, a website, it doesn't really matter what you're selling. then that looks like first signups or email signups, a first purchase in certain instances. And when we get them to cross this loyalty threshold throughout this customer journey, then ultimately we want them to have continued or regular usage or multiple purchases. Monthly active users is a typical term used in the software space, but another behavior of loyalty that I'd like to make sure to mention is if someone uploads a profile picture to their account, then it's typically an indicator of loyalty because they expect to use it on a regular basis, and anyone else they interact with, they'd like them to see their face. So it's these types of behaviors that we want to measure and track, along with advocacy and crossing this threshold. These behaviors are able to be tracked these days on pretty much anything we can think of because of technology. So it's really important to make sure that we can increase the level of trust we create with our customers and users. And that's why this is one of my favorite quotes by Stephen Covey. Trust is a pragmatic, tangible, actionable asset that we can create much faster than we think possible. And it's very true. So let's look at how we build trust and how we can move people into a trust relationship. In order to do that, there are these 6 specific tenets of trust that are actionable and tangible and are actually things we can do to more rapidly increase the level of trust we're able to gain. The first is obvious: reputation. That's why testimonials are so important, case studies, awards, social proof. The best example I can give you here is if you are in a new city and you've got a urge for Mexican food, you open your Yelp app and the first Mexican place you see is a block away, and it's got 5-star reviews and 5 of them. However, you've got another Mexican restaurant that's 4 blocks away and there are 497 reviews and it's a 4.7-star restaurant. I think we all know which one we're going to go to because the 5-star restaurant with the 5 reviews, we're assuming is probably the chef, the hostess, maybe a waiter or 2, and a regular that they asked to fill out the review while they were sitting there. So reputation obviously is going to be an important factor to this. The next is going to be commitment. And this is something that we typically avoid as humans and as people because it's harder to do. We don't want to be nailed down. We don't want to have to commit to much at all. So we avoid this type of language. But making small promises and bold commitments is an immediate way to increase trust. Talking about it and using that language. And here's an example for this. You go to a website these days and you scroll down to the bottom and you've got the ability to enter your email address in to subscribe to a newsletter. So imagine if you went to that same newsletter subscription form and it said something a little different. It said, enter your email address and we promise that on the second Tuesday of every month, you are going to get the best content delivered to your inbox guaranteed. It just sounds different. It feels different. It's a language that actually emphasizes commitment. And it's something that immediately increases the level of trust that you're able to gain. Consistency is an obvious one as well. I'm sure a lot of these probably seem obvious and are common sense, but hopefully they're still valuable. Consistency is important because it's inherent for us to not trust something that we don't think looks or feels right. And that's why brands these days spend so much money on brand guidelines document, ensuring that a logo looks exactly like it does here as it does there. Lexicon and language, imagery, voice, all of these things play along in how consistent a brand or a product is. To the extent of a client that I worked with at one point, actually needing to include the Instagram filter to use with any post in their brand guidelines document. It's gotten to that extent. And the next one is really important, I think, because people always choose perfection or imperfection with integrity over a perfect facade. That's why transparency is extremely important when it comes to building trust. Being open and honest, providing background, don't shy away from the conversation. Share more than what you think is necessary, because we believe more in imperfection as humans than we do in perfection. And it's ironic because as marketers, we're honestly paid to make sure everything looks perfect, but we don't believe in it. Now, if we go to the next tenet of trust, we look at vulnerability. Vulnerability is important because we need to make sure that we are more human and that we're actually dealing with other humans on the other side of all of this technology we're using, even more so probably today than ever before. Recognizing and responding to these other people and making sure they're aware that we're not perfect is important. And it's why I believe these days we're seeing faces on everything. If you go to a chat window or see a chat pop up on a website, you've got someone's face there. It's in email signatures these days. It's because we want to do business with other people. We don't want to do business with corporations or companies. And finally, listening with the intent to understand is the sixth tenet to trust. And it's really about responding with passion, honoring someone's feedback, and acknowledging that they've been heard. And imagine this scenario. You're working on a team, and this team has 15 clients, all with deadlines due. And the client or one of those clients sends you an email, but you aren't responding for a couple of days because you're so busy. Wouldn't you think that responding to the email, not fixing the problem, but just responding to that email saying that you got the email, we've acknowledged the request, we're looking into it, we'll take care of it right away, that automatically makes sure that someone is aware that you are listening. If you don't respond to an email, whether it's urgent or not, then no one knows, and it's not really being acknowledged. So this is just an example of how listening is important, and some experience I've had in the past. All of these things are an addition equation because the more of any of these increases that level of trust you're able to gain. So let's look at loyalty. Loyalty is sustainable and self-determined. It is us self-determining that we are no longer going to shop around for a product or service or a competitor. Now, if we look at loyalty over time, then we could see that this curve is a lot smoother. And the reason it's smoother is because it's thousands, if not millions, of those micro interactions. And everything under this curve is actually an investment that we've made, an investment of time, money, or energy into whatever this product or service is. And the more time and investment we're able to make, it's even harder to actually step away. And an example that I'd like to provide here is the difference between Microsoft Office and Google Business Tools. I've used Office for over 10 years now, and I hate it. I honestly can't stand it, and it doesn't work well. It's really buggy. Google offers the same exact product online, free with your email, etc. Does all of the same things, is not very buggy at all, but would I ever switch to Google after using Microsoft Office for that many years? It's highly unlikely. So if we look at how we can accelerate loyalty and increase the amount of these investments that people are making into our brand, you could consider that all of this is a macro experience that someone has with our brand. If trust are the micro experiences, then loyalty can be considered macro experiences. And these are 5 ways that we can accelerate how much someone or how loyal someone is to our product or our service or our organization. The first is obvious, and that's earning trust over time. We need to continue to be trustworthy, continue to earn it, solve problems, continue to add value, and keep our promises. That's extremely important. We also need to make sure we reduce effort. So simplifying tasks, reducing friction, making sure we do it ourselves so that we know if there are any barriers that are in the experience that need to be addressed. Providing a human touch is the next one, and this is an obvious thing. People relate to other people. Like I said, we want to do business with other people. So using human language is important, using faces, picking up the phone. I mean, we deal with so much technology these days that sometimes, especially today, just picking up the phone to see how someone is doing, it goes a long, long way. And then being personable, making sure that even in your language, you're being personable, because it's hard to get that across, especially on technology these days. So if you've ever been on a sales team or had to sell anything before, you may have heard that you need to smile while you're on the other side of that phone, even if they can't see your face, because they can tell whether you're smiling. I think that's very true. Handling service disruptions is also another key way to address and increase loyalty rapidly. And this is even a way that helps you to let people skip the loyalty phase altogether and become an advocate. So acknowledging that you've heard them, making commitments to fix the problem, empowering the service team is really important and an effective way. A great example of this is the Ritz-Carlton. If you've ever heard, everyone that's trained and works for the Ritz-Carlton is able to approve any customer request up to $3,000 on the spot. That is empowering a service team to ensure that every disruption or service issue can be handled. Over communicating is extremely important as well, and making sure that we clean up the mess if we do anything wrong. Improving lives is the obvious one, right? This is at the core of every experience we create, and it's the point of all that we're doing really, is to improve other people's lives. And that's why this is not a financial goal, it's a human or a people goal. And advocacy behaviors and how we trigger those are really a way that people can craft a story around how they tell other people about you. And again, triggering advocacy in business is really the holy grail of success. So let's look at ways that we can trigger advocacy. The first is by rewarding us, right? Getting us, making us feel like we've done something great, inviting us into a community. All of these things are going to be really important for building advocacy and triggering these types of behaviors. Surprising us with something that we remember and that we can only get from you is a really effective way of increasing advocacy. Inviting us in, making us a part of the community, making us feel like we're insiders and part of something bigger is a way to increase advocacy. Making it really easy to share, removing any barriers, helping us tell that story, and providing those tools to help is a really good way of doing this. And then, of course, honoring feedback, recognizing it, using the same language in your responses, and communicating more than once. Recognizing us for our accomplishments is also a really effective way of increasing advocacy. This is something that we can brag about, and using our name is important in this. So I know I've given you a lot of information, a lot of things that are, in the air and probably sound great, but you're probably thinking to yourself now, how do I apply these ideas? And how do I measure if my team is doing well in achieving these goals? So in order to do that, let's look at how this typically happens today, or at least in most of my experiences. And we have stakeholders that are using the return on an investment, or their battery power or oxygen, however you want to put it. And normally they are requesting for a set of features of some type of product. And that's a fundamental problem with the business today, in my opinion, and with most businesses, because normally this comes in the form of an RFP, and we don't usually know how much money is available. However, we don't necessarily just want features. We want features that maximize trust, loyalty, and advocacy in the users and the customers and the market that we're trying to serve. But there's a really big missing component here. And you're probably familiar with what that is. That's why this is another great quote that I like to mention, and it's "Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast" by Peter Drucker. The team is what is required for us to achieve this level of success, because no one man can do it on his own, or woman. And that's why, if we take a step back and look at this, we can see that we have people asking people to design products for other people. Obviously, there are a lot of people in this equation, and we need to understand those factors if we're going to be successful. Now, at the core of all of this is one of many different types of frameworks or processes or project management tools. I'm sure we've probably heard of many more we can name. Agile, lean, whatever it is at the core. However, it's not enough. And I've seen teams operating at all of these at the nth degree and still create shitty products. That's because it's not enough. And we really need strategy as well as tactics alongside these things. That's why another quote, and my favorite is by Sun Tzu in the book Art of War. And he says that strategy without tactics is the slowest path to victory. However, tactics without strategy is that clinking of swords you hear right before defeat. It's that noise. So if we agree that we really need strategy as well as tactics in order to be successful, then what else is missing from this scenario? The first is the vision. And this is extremely important because it's required for us to know what our true north is and what we're trying to achieve ultimately for other people. And we'll talk about vision specifically here in a sec. We also need a team that's motivated to achieve that vision, because you can have the best vision in the world, the best strategy in the world, but if your team isn't motivated to achieve it, then where are you? On the tactic side, what we really need are capabilities, and that includes resources, tools, expertise, experience, all of those factors. And we don't necessarily need features. What we really need is a roadmap. And this is the path that we need to take, or that journey we're going to go on in order to achieve our vision, of which the journey does not determine the vision. So if we look at all of these factors alongside our way of operating in our agile or lean methodologies, and you could say that the more of all of these are going to help us build momentum in our teams and help us to achieve greatness. So when we look at vision, let's look at making sure that we have a understanding of who it is we're serving and what they care about, why we would choose a certain brand or a product, and then measuring that ability to provide this experience and inspire other people to follow along and to join the cause. A really good example of this and why this is so important is a project that we're working on currently. Our product is in the healthcare space, and we recently had an interview with a director at a hospital system that was managing 8,000 patients. And as we built through this product and all these features, we never once assumed that we would have any issues around internet access or internet activity. And we spoke to this doctor, and he actually mentioned that one of his biggest barriers was actually minutes. And that was because he served an underserved population, a low-income population. And it was just something that we had never really thought of throughout the development of this product. And 5 or 6 added features or added insights came just from that perception and just from that perspective. Of course, all perspectives are valuable and have been proven to be a competitive advantage today. So I just wanted to give that example because of the importance of understanding who it is we're serving, the vision, and what ultimately we're trying to change and make better in the world. Now, when we look at motivation, it's really one team, one dream. It's one team that's strategically aligned, committed, and confident, and measuring and monitoring how well we're doing on that team on a daily, weekly, even monthly basis is important. When we look at capabilities, I consider this more like right butts in the right seats, right? We've got to have people with the skills, knowledge, talent, the processes, frameworks, tools, all of the resources obviously necessary to create these types of experiences. But the team also needs to be able to understand innovation, be adamant about continuing to learn and increase their level of knowledge. On the roadmap, we have a tactical plan. This is actionable, bold, and long-term. It's measured by, our success is measured by how healthy a roadmap is. And that's why it needs to be bold, committed, and it needs to consider design standards. It needs to have milestones that we need to reach and at a specific time. One thing I want to mention is projects, which have typically been the request that I've gotten with my help, are very finite. They have a beginning and an end, whereas products are endless. They have to continue to evolve. They have to continue to get better over time. And that's why a long-term roadmap is important to achieve that. So let's take all of these concepts and look at them more like a fuzzy mathematical equation. As we mentioned, if we understand what the definition of strategy is, being the combination of a clear, comprehensive, and shared vision accompanied by a team that has the motivation to achieve it, then we could say that strategy is actually equal to vision times motivation. If we look at tactics, then we could say tactics are actually equal to roadmap times capabilities. So strategy is required along with tactics in order to achieve momentum. And if we break these apart, then vision times motivation times roadmap times capability is what's required to equal momentum. And this is a multiplication equation on purpose, because 0 of any of these will give you 0 momentum. So let's look at what happens when we don't have a clearly defined vision for everyone to help or try to achieve. And that typically manifests in confusion. I typically use the analogy of everyone on a team being in their own canoe and rowing in different directions. They aren't necessarily sure where the true north is or what the focus of the team is, so they're essentially just working on their own thing. If a team has a clearly defined vision and everyone knows what that is, but isn't necessarily motivated to achieve it, then that manifests in resistance or apathy. This is typically results in people coming to work, not working on the project that we're all supposed to be working on and doing other things. Now, if we have a clearly defined vision with a fully motivated team, but no roadmap to achieve that vision, then that manifests in waste, technical waste or otherwise, depending on what industry you're in. Now, last but not least, if we have a clearly defined vision with a fully motivated team and a roadmap on how to get there, but not the capabilities, then that manifests and results in frustration. And this is because we're making promises we can't keep, we're learning on the job, probably missing deadlines. And I'm sure, at least typically when I do this talk in person, a lot of heads are nodding at this point because a lot of us have seen pretty much all of these, or at least some of them in some of the teams that we've worked on or even currently work on today. That's why one of these, another quote for you is one of my favorites by Peter Drucker as well. You can't manage what you don't measure. And that's what hopefully these ideas and these tactics will help you to do. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. And it's a traditional school of thought, if you've ever been to or heard of the dimensions of competition in business school or otherwise. Sometimes it's referred to as the iron triangle. And what we're told is that we can only pick 2 of these. We can be high quality and we can be fast, but it's going to cost you. We can be fast and be low price, but you're going to give up on quality. And we can be high quality and low price, but it's going to take a long time to get there. Well, I'm here to tell you that that's bullshit, mainly because that's not how these guys play. The customer experience is really what has the most transformative and disruptive power with regard to the products and services that we offer today and our organizations. And these elements only matter in the context and to the degree that it impacts the human experience we have. My last quote, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel, by Maya Angelou. And I feel this quote is also very fitting given today's time and the world we live in today. So I appreciate everyone's attention and look forward to questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Essa. Dude, my mind is like blown right now.
I'm gonna take that as a good thing.
All right. So I'm kind of setting everything up a little bit so everybody can kind of see us more properly. So we should be in gallery view, so everybody should be able to see our faces. So Essa, that was so informative. It's mind-blowing. I think you mentioned a couple of times, like, this may seem obvious, but it's still so eye-opening to realize that these tools are accessible to us and we can really leverage this framework to do some real positive change, to really like bring the people along with you in your cause. And I think that's super appropriate during this time and age of just you know, how do we make sure we spread good news, we spread positivity, and we make sure that people are on the same page as us. We're not being isolated, we're not separated, divisive. So I think it's super cool, this framework. It's really amazing. Great job. So we do have
I'm glad you say that.
Yeah. So we do have a couple of questions came in, but I know people are probably going to need to take some time to process the wisdom you just shared with
I'm sure.
us. So we'll give them some time to type out your questions. So if you do have questions, put it in the YouTube chat, put it in the Slack. Our team will gather it up and we will ask Essa all the questions. All right, so the first question that came in was, when you mentioned trust and technology, companies like Facebook and Amazon come to mind. When a company loses your trust, how difficult is it for them to get their customers back on the ladder?
That's a really good question. And it all has to really do with whether or not they've crossed that threshold of loyalty or not, or advocacy. Because as I mentioned, the further up you go in the ladder, the harder it is to come back down. Now, if that first experience they have with your brand or your product or your organization or your political campaign, I'm saying that with a grain of salt, but it's really hard for us to gain that trust back. That's why first impressions are so important, and going the extra mile is so important. If we do our job and we get them to cross that trust threshold, then we've invested something in that product or service, and we feel bad going away from that investment, right? I mean, it's just human nature, but it's a lot easier to do the lower we are on that ladder, if that answers the question.
Yeah, when I was reading this question too, I was kind of thinking, you mentioned Microsoft Office versus Google Docs, and I'm a person who moved to Google Docs. Like, I started in Office, but I love Google Docs, man. I'm like, I live in there now.
I'm trying to get there.
So I want to know,
it's
like,
just hard, you know?
What makes a company, like, where do you think that, because I was on some level of the ladder with Microsoft Office, right? But then I made that jump. Like, what are your thoughts around that? Like, how can they be successful in kind of grabbing people in that way?
I think a lot of that comes down to ultimately to value, right? If we think about it, if we're on a ladder, again, using that analogy, and we've invested a lot of time and our own energy into a product or a service or an organization, then if we see that a different product or service is going to provide us with a lot more value, or like I said, one of the elements around loyalty is reducing effort. If we are able to get more time back in our day because we're able to reduce the level of effort that we're required to put into a certain product or service, then it's a lot easier to make that jump and make that leap of faith. So when you do invest that much time, it's really how much more value does this other service or product offer, and is it enough for me to really forego all of that investment and time and energy I've put into this other product or service?
Totally, that makes sense. All right, the next question I have is, how does skepticism play a role in building trust? What tips can you share for overcoming users' confusion or misunderstanding during initial experiences?
I'm not sure if I understand the question around skepticism. So if there is skepticism, that really makes me think that there were experiences prior to getting to that point that made someone skeptic that it's, you know, it's actual or it's true. So whether that was with that same brand or not, those experiences could have been with a different brand, a different product or service, you know? So skepticism is something that trust is literally meant to do away with, right? And it's also hopefully a framework that lets you kind of filter through all the noise, all of the, you know, different aspects and different ways that we do business today. It's like, you know, how much does someone really trust us? How much trust are we able to gain with our clients and our customers? And are we creating the value that we're supposed to be creating? You know, as long as we're doing that and we're cleaning up the mess, if we do something wrong, then I personally believe skepticism goes out the window. Does that help answer the question?
I think so.
I hope I did a good
enough
job.
Yeah, I think when I read the question, and Nick, feel free to kind of clarify. I think the way I read it too is
Yeah,
like,
I'm happy to answer any questions as well after the fact. So
awesome.
feel free to reach out, and you can scan that right behind me and get in touch.
Yeah, awesome. Because I'm in the space of needing to establish kind of that value proposition of the product. Like we're at the starting point of the process. We're trying to figure out like what will resonate with the people that we want to serve. But I've also been on teams where we put out that message and it just didn't work well. It didn't hit the way that we wanted to hit. And so I'm thinking like, but our reasoning is good. Like we understand, we have all these like things in our heads that didn't translate as well. Like, do you feel like it's important to get that right the first time? Like, is it too hard to kind of go back and correct that if that happens?
I don't think it's too hard. And as I mentioned, you know, if we're creating products should be endless, right? They're not necessarily finite, and they don't start and end. We want to continue to evolve, continue to improve, continue to create more value. So to answer your question, I don't think it's hard to go back and rethink things. I think it is really important at the beginning to understand the customer, to understand what they value and what they're going to want the product to provide them. And that's why empathy tools are so important. Personas and developing those and building them out almost too extensively is going to help tremendously. And that's a lot of what I do with my clients and workshops and whatnot. It's heavily focused on understanding the customer, the client we're serving, the market we're serving, and what they value and the problems that they have specifically that we can help solve with the product that we're creating or the service we're creating. So it's really important to understand that. And that really also goes along with the vision that I discussed,
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So we've got a couple of people they really loved your presentation. They would really love if they have access to review it again. Will you be willing to share a PDF in the Slack, or where can we kind of review this information again?
I'm happy to review it with anyone. I can, feel free to reach out to me and scan that code and shoot me an email, and I can send anything along.
Perfect. All right. Next question is, what are your suggestions for getting leaders on board with this kind of thinking? Basically breaking this is the way we've always done it mentality.
Oh, I love that quote. Most dangerous words in business is we've always done it that way. And getting leaders to really understand that we aren't doing this for financial objectives, right? It's not how we operate as humans. At least that's how I feel. And while profit is required for us to stay in business, it's not. I personally believe that we are doing what we do to really improve the world and make things, make the world a better place. So getting leaders on board is really not easy to do, but if there's enough of a groundswell from the team and the people on the front lines, like I said, then the leaders have to listen, and it's going to be a requirement. Otherwise, they'll be kind of left in the dust, in my opinion.
I get that. All right. What should we read or listen to in terms of books, audiobooks, or podcasts to get a better grasp on what you talked about today?
Oh, wow. There's so many. This is a result of a lot of different books and concepts and ideas. Drive by Daniel Pink is a really good one, and discusses a lot around the group dynamics, and the words I used under team motivation are really intentional, which are aligned, committed, and confident. This is based on the idea of group dynamics. If you've ever heard of Maslow and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's also highly recommended. Design Sprint, Traction by Gino Wickman. I could go on. There are a bunch right there. Blue Ocean Startup. Start with Why is extremely important. I know a couple of people have kind of mentioned the Golden Circle. Mindset, Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck is a phenomenal book. And if you haven't seen her TED Talk, then definitely go on and look her up. And those are just a few of many. I'm sure I could probably ramble on for a while. What else you should read and check out.
Awesome. Do you have a social media presence? Where can people kind of follow you, see what books you're reading, see what you're up to?
I'm horrible. I should be better about social media and keeping up with it, but you know, cobbler shoe and all. So you can follow Growth Mob on Twitter, Instagram, or shoot me an email at hello@growthmob.co, or check out my website. And yeah, so I'm on there, just not as often as I should be.
I mean, I think that's fair. I think it can be a little bit distracting sometimes, but it's always good to.
Well, I'm also.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm also in school right now, so it's like hard to manage everything on top of work. But
yeah, totally. All right, I think we have 2 more minutes. I don't see any more questions so far, but this has been super great, Essa. I really appreciated it. The team really appreciated it. Actually, I do have like an outro that I want to read. So a round of applause for Essa.
Thank you.
I
want to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to mention that hopefully these tools help you filter out through the noise and help us achieve what we're trying to achieve in today's world, given how crazy it is, and hopefully that was the case. And again, please let me know how you liked it and whether you think it can be improved. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Essa. Thank you also to the Midwest Design Week team, to all our attendees, to our sponsors, especially our event sponsor, Valve and Meter. We have a few more events left for the week. Cincinnati Diversity Coalition is happening at noon today, which will be a discussion about increasing and elevating Black talent in the creative industry. And of course, we have our keynote event on Friday night, Design for Liberation by Teresa Moses, who is a creative director at Blackbird Revolt, a social justice-based design studio in Minnesota. All that is on MidwestDesignWeek.com. Also, it's going to be on Slack if you don't see it for whatever reason. Anyone with the MWDW tag in the name is part of the organizing team, so you can just ping us on Slack. We will get to you and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Hope you have a lovely day and hope to see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks.